You've entered Interstellar Chronicles. Close your eyes and drift into another world, a place where stars whisper forgotten names, where time folds and destinies collide across galaxies. Your journey begins now. She's my Kryon commander, but keeps flushing violet when I fix her ship's Sci-Fi HFY story. The galaxy sprawls like a tapestry of arrogance, woven with the threads of 1,000 alien empires, each proclaiming dominion over the stars. Their worlds pulse with technologies that bend reality itself. Gravitic fields that sculpt planets into fortresses, plasma lances that pierce moons like paper, neural-linked starships that hum with the thoughts of their crews. Their hulls shimmering with adaptive alloys that shift to evade enemy sensors. Their cores powered by quantum reactors that harness the entropy of collapsing stars. Their cultures, forged in conquest and pride, measure worth by strength, longevity, and the cold precision of logic, dismissing any species that fails to match their might as insignificant, unworthy of the cosmic stage. To them, humans are a fleeting anomaly, their soft bodies and volatile hearts deemed a jest, their brief lives a curiosity at best, their scattered colonies on the galaxy's fringes barely a footnote in the annals of empires. Yet, in the shadowed corners of the universe, where steel meets soul, a single spark can ignite an inferno. This is the tale of Elias Kane, a man whose quiet fire burned brighter than the stars, and Verizol, the Kryon commander whose heart, bound by centuries of warrior dogma, learned to see its glow, forever altering the galaxy's view of humanity. Elias Kane stood alone in the heart of the Kryon Dominion's council chamber, aboard the starship Etherian. The chamber was a cathedral of alien artistry, its towering crystal spires pulsing with bioluminescent light that shifted from sapphire to emerald, casting prismatic patterns across a polished obsidian floor that reflected the stars beyond like a mirror of the void, each tile etched with runes commemorating Kryon victories. The air thrummed with the low, resonant hum of gravitic stabilizers, a subtle vibration that spoke of the Kryon's mastery over forces humans could only dream of harnessing. The technology so advanced it seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Alien delegates from across the galaxy filled tiered seats, their forms a riot of diversity. Scaled reptilians with eyes like molten metal, feathered avianoids whose crests flared with emotion, glowing exoskeletal beings whose bioluminescence pulsed in rhythm with their thoughts, and gelatinous entities whose forms shimmered with internalized light, a silent language of color and motion. Their gazes fixed on Elias, a lone human in a worn jumpsuit, its patches a patchwork of survival from years aboard a salvage freighter, each stitch a story of near disasters and stubborn endurance. His dark hair was streaked with engine grease, his calloused hands marked by the labor of coaxing life from broken machines, his hazel eyes bright with a defiance he didn't voice, a quiet strength that belied his unassuming frame. He was no diplomat, no warrior, just a salvager who drifted into the wrong nebula, captured when his ship, the Drift Sparrow, grazed Dominion territory during a desperate run for scrap to pay off debts to a syndicate on a human fringe colony. Their threats a shadow that followed him across the stars. Now he faced the High Conclave, accused of espionage, his only crime being human in a place where humanity was a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst, a species dismissed as too fragile to matter. Verizol, the Kryon commander, loomed above him on a floating dais, her presence commanding the chamber like a storm held in check. 7 feet of sapphire-scaled muscle, her form was a vision of lethal elegance, her tail coiling with controlled power, its tip adorned with a ceremonial blade etched with Kryon runes that glowed faintly with stored plasma, a relic of her clan's victories over the silicate warlords of the Outer Veil. Her eyes, twin suns of molten gold, burned with a disdain honed by centuries of Kryon supremacy, their intensity enough to make lesser beings flinch. The Kryon were warriors, their culture forged in the fires of 100 wars, their history written in the blood of enemies and the brilliance of their technology. Gravitic manipulators that could crush starships into rubble, plasma lances that burned hotter than stars, neural interfaces that linked warriors to their machines with seamless precision, their minds melding with the cold logic of their ships, their scales etched with microscopic runes that recorded their deeds. To them, humans were ephemeral, their brief lives and volatile emotions a weakness, their fragile bodies a liability unfit for the galaxy's brutal stage. their colonies mocked as fleeting experiments doomed to fail. Vera's voice cut through the chamber, sharp as a plasma blade, demanding to know why Elias had trespassed in their domain. Her words laced with the certainty that no human could have a reason worth hearing, her tail flicking in irritation as she awaited his response, the runes on her scales shimmering faintly with her rising temper. Elias stood straight, his hazel eyes meeting hers without flinching, though his heart pounded beneath his calm exterior, a rhythm he'd learned to master in the face of pirate ambushes and failing reactors. He admitted his error with a trace of dry humor, explaining that the drift sparrow was hunting scrap in a dead system, not secrets in Kryon space. He'd miscalculated a jump, a mistake born of exhaustion, a faulty NEV computer, and a desperate need to pay off debts to a syndicate that had his life in its grip, their threats echoing from a dusty colony bar where he'd last seen their enforcers, their eyes cold as the void. His honesty, delivered with a slight, self-deprecating smile, drew hisses and clicks from the delegates, alien laughter, mocking what they saw as naivety, their voices a chorus of scorn that echoed off the crystal walls, a cacophony that sought to diminish him. Vera's tail flicked sharply, her scales catching the light in a cascade of blue, each one a testament to her rank as a commander who'd led campaigns against the Vren swarm, their insectoid hive ships a plague on the Dominion's borders, and the silicate warlords, whose crystalline fleets had once threatened Kryon trade routes. She leaned forward, her voice a low growl, accusing him of lying. For what species would wander so carelessly into the borders of the Dominion? A region patrolled by warships capable of reducing fleets to ash in moments, their gravitic cannons a legend even among rival empires? Elias held her gaze, suggesting she check his ship's logs, adding with a wry chuckle that the only thing he hid was a bad habit of missing deadlines and a stash of contraband coffee beans he'd scavenged from a derelict freighter, a small rebellion against the galaxy's indifference that he savored in the quiet of his ship's cockpit, the bitter taste a reminder of Earth's distant comforts. At Vera's command, a hollow display flickered to life, projecting the drift sparrow's logs in a swirl of luminous data that danced like fireflies in the chamber's dim light, each point of light a record of his solitary life. The records were unremarkable. A salvager's route through dead systems, coordinates for asteroid belts rich in rare metals, a log of repairs to a failing reactor, no weapons, no encrypted files, just the mundane records of a man scraping by in a galaxy that cared little for his kind, his every jump a gamble against the void. The conclave murmured, their disappointment palpable. They'd hoped for a spy to crush, a reason to assert their dominance over this insignificant species, their scales and feathers rustling in agitation. Among them, Drencal, a rival Kryon commander, leaned forward, his crimson scales glinting with malice, his eyes narrow slits of amber that seemed to burn with ambition. He suggested immediate execution to deter other humans from encroaching on Kryon space, his voice dripping with scorn as he called Elias a pest, unworthy of the chamber's time, his tail lashing to emphasize his point. Vera silenced him with a sharp gesture, her tail lashing in response, but something in Elias's steady demeanor unsettled her, a puzzle that gnawed at her warrior's instincts. Kryon valued strength, physical, mental, unyielding. Yet this human, small and unarmed, stood before her without fear, his quiet confidence a challenge to everything she'd been taught. Instead of execution, she issued a challenge. Elias would join her vanguard to repel an incursion by the Vren swarm, a merciless insectoid enemy whose hive ships plagued the Dominion's borders, their bioplasma weapons dissolving metal and flesh alike, their psychic presence a hum that could unravel minds. Refusal meant death. Elias swallowed hard, his mind racing through the implications. Images of his colony, his lost family, the debts that chained him to this life, the sister whose laughter he still heard in his dreams. He was no soldier, but he'd survived pirate ambushes, reactor leaks, and the crushing loneliness of deep space, where every day was a gamble against the void. He nodded, his voice steady as he accepted, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face, quickly masked by a lopsided grin that hid the fear coiling in his chest. Unbeknownst to him, Vera's order was no act of mercy. It was a test, designed to prove humanity's weakness, to watch this soft one break under the weight of Kryon expectations. Drencal's scales clicked in amusement, certain the human would fail, his own ambitions to undermine Vera's command simmering beneath his smirk, a plan to seize her position already forming in his mind, his allies whispering in the shadows of the chamber. Fate, however, had other plans, its threads weaving a story none could foresee. The star lance, a Kryon warship of obsidian and crystal, cut through the void like a blade through silk, its sleek hull shimmering with faint gravitic distortions that warped the starlight around it, creating a halo of refracted colors that made it seem half dream, half machine. Its corridors pulsed with energy, plasma conduits glowing beneath transparent panels, their light casting eerie shadows on walls etched with Kryon battle sigils, each marking a victory over centuries of war, their intricate patterns a testament to a culture that revered honor above all. The armories bristled with weapons, plasma lances that could burn through holes, gravitic disruptors that twisted matter into knots, neural link drones that moved like extensions of their warrior's will, their sensors glowing like eyes in the dark. Elias was an outsider among the crew, a speck of humanity dwarfed by towering Kryon warriors whose scales clicked in amusement as he fumbled with their gravitic tools, their weight calibrated for beings twice his strength, their interfaces designed for minds linked to neural networks he could only mimic through sheer stubbornness. They called him Soft One, their voices dripping with mockery, their culture equating physical power with worth, their rituals of strength, like the trials of flame, where warriors dueled on volcanic worlds, their blades glowing with plasma, defining their hierarchy. Yet Elias worked quietly, his hands steady, his mind sharp from years of coaxing life from derelict ships, from piecing together reactors with nothing but wire and will, from navigating asteroid fields where a single misstep meant oblivion. Alien technology was complex, its interfaces neural-linked and its logic alien, but to him, it was just another puzzle, a challenge no different from the wrecks he'd salvaged in systems forgotten by the galaxy. He studied the Starlink systems in stolen moments, poring over schematics projected on his wristcom, deciphering their logic with a salvager's instinct honed on wrecks no one else dared touch. He learned the rhythm of the ship's gravitic core, the pulse of its plasma conduits, the way its neural interfaces hummed with the thoughts of its crew, a symphony of cold precision that fascinated him even as it alienated him, a reminder of how far he was from home. Vera watched from the command deck, her golden eyes tracking Elias's movements through hollow feeds, her tail coiling tightly as she wrestled with her own curiosity, a sensation she'd been trained to suppress since her youth in the Kryon academies. She'd expected him to crumble, to beg for release back to his insignificant life, but he adapted, his hands moving with a precision that spoke of resilience, not weakness, his hazel eyes bright with a focus that defied her expectations. When a plasma conduit failed during a routine patrol, threatening a cascade failure that could cripple the ship's weapons, Elias jury-rigged a fix using scraps from his own toolkit, a human wrench, a coil of wire salvaged from his ship, and a bypass circuit he'd scavenged from a derelict freighter years ago, its casing still marked with the faded logo of a human colony that no longer existed. Core, a grizzled Kryon engineer with scars crisscrossing his emerald scales, snorted at Elias's suggestion to reroute power through a secondary node to reduce overload risk, his pride stung by the idea that a human could improve Kryon engineering, a craft perfected over centuries by minds linked to the Dominion's neural archives. Yet when Core tested it, the system stabilized, the plasma flow humming smoothly, the ship's weapons back online in moments, their glow a testament to Elias's ingenuity. Core's grudging nod was the first crack in the crew's disdain, his rough voice muttering that perhaps the Soft One wasn't entirely useless, his scales clicking in a rhythm that spoke of reluctant respect, a rare concession from a warrior who'd seen 100 battles. Vera's curiosity deepened, though she buried it beneath her warrior's pride, her scales remaining a stoic sapphire, her face a mask of command that hid the questions swirling in her mind. Drencal, however, watched from the sidelines, his crimson scales glinting with resentment, his amber eyes narrowing as he saw his rival's crew begin to accept the human. He whispered to his allies that Vera's tolerance of the human was weakness, a flaw that could cost her command, his words spreading like venom through the crew, his ambition to replace her growing with every nod Elias earned, a threat to Kryon purity that he vowed to crush. A new tension emerged with the arrival of a Kryon religious sect, the Order of the Eternal Pyre, whose members wore scales painted with ash, their eyes glowing with fervor as they preached that emotions were a divine gift, not a weakness, a belief that clashed with Kryon orthodoxy. Their leader, Sister Zorin, a silver-scaled priestess with a voice like molten glass, met with Vera, urging her to embrace the human's influence, seeing in Elias a sign of the Pyre's prophecy, a flame from beyond the stars that would rekindle Kryon's souls. Vera, torn between duty and doubt, dismissed Zorin's words, but the priestess's presence stirred unrest among the crew, some whispering that the human's actions echoed the Pyre's teachings, others loyal to the conclave's dogma siding with Drenkal's call for purity. Elias, unaware of the sect's interest, continued his work, his interactions with Kor growing into a cautious friendship, their conversations in the mess hall a blend of technical banter and shared stories. Kor's tales of Kryon duels, Elias's memories of human colonies where hope outlasted despair. Late at night, when the ship's lights dimmed to mimic a Kryon dusk, Vera reviewed footage of Elias at work, his focus a stark contrast to the Kryon's brash confidence, his hands dancing over alien machinery with a grace she hadn't expected. His hazel eyes narrowed in concentration, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he solved each puzzle. She told herself it was duty that drove her scrutiny, a need to assess this anomaly, but her scales flushed a faint violet, a Kryon sign of emotion she refused to acknowledge, a betrayal of her training to suppress all but honor and strength. She recalled her own rise to the Kryon ranks, a path of relentless discipline, her emotions locked away after the loss of her clutch sister, Lyra, in a Vren raid years ago, her death a wound that Vera had buried beneath duty, her scales never again showing the violet of grief until now. Kryon dogma taught that feelings were a chain, binding warriors to failure, yet Elias's quiet resilience challenged that belief, his every action a question she couldn't answer, a spark that threatened to ignite something long dormant. She summoned him to the command deck one evening, under the pretext of discussing his repairs. But their conversation wandered, a dance of words that stretched into the ship's quiet cycles. Elias spoke of Earth, of its chaotic beauty, storms that tore through skies, oceans that roared with untamed power, music that carried centuries of human longing, songs that had kept him alive when the galaxy turned cold. He spoke of his mother's lullabies, sung on a colony where stars were the only light, of his sister Mara's laughter before the pirates came, her memory a weight he carried in every salvage run. Vera shared fragments of Kryon lore, tales of ancestors who fought on worlds of molten glass, their scales etched with victories, their names sung in rituals that echoed through the Dominion's halls. She spoke of Lyra, her clutch sister, whose laughter had once filled their clan's halls, her death a shadow that had shaped Vera's life, a confession that surprised even herself. Elias listened, asking questions that made her pause. Why did Kryon suppress their emotions? Why was vulnerability seen as shame? Why did they fear what made them alive? His words, simple yet piercing, planted seeds of doubt in her mind, challenging the dogma she'd lived by for decades. Her scales flickering violet despite her efforts to remain stoic, a sign that her heart was no longer hers to control. The Starlands encountered a neutral alien species, the Lorith, a crystalline race whose bodies refracted light into dazzling patterns, their voices a harmonic hum that resonated in the bones, their ships a lattice of crystal and energy that seemed to sing as they moved. The Lorith were traders, their network of commerce spanning the galaxy, their neutrality a shield against the wars of empires like the Kryon, their culture valuing balance above all. Vera negotiated with their envoy, Silvara, whose crystalline form shimmered with every word, her voice a melody that carried both wisdom and wariness, her facets reflecting the Starlint's lights in a kaleidoscope of color. The Lorith had intercepted Vren transmissions, hinting at a larger assault planned against the Dominion's borders, but they demanded Kryon technology in exchange for the data, a price Vera could not pay without violating her honor, her scales clicking in frustration as she refused. Elias, present as a maintenance worker, overheard the exchange and suggested a compromise. Offer the Lorith non-military tech like the Starlint's waste recycling systems, which he'd studied and could replicate with human ingenuity, a system he'd once adapted for a human colony's failing habdome. Vera hesitated, her pride warring with practicality, but Silvara's interest was piqued. her crystalline eyes glowing with curiosity. Elias explained the system's mechanics in simple terms, his humor disarming her skepticism, his analogies to human water cycles drawing a rare hum of amusement from the Lorith. The Lorith agreed, providing the Vren data, a trove of coordinates and psychic signatures that revealed the swarm's plans. Drencal, furious at the humans' involvement, accused Vera of weakness, his voice loud enough to draw the crew's attention, his crimson scales glinting as he rallied his allies. But Kor defended Elias, his scars gleaming as he vouched for the humans' ingenuity, his voice a growl that silenced the whispers. Sister Zorin, observing silently, saw the exchange as further proof of the Pyre's prophecy, her silver scales glowing faintly as she whispered prayers to the eternal flame, her presence a quiet challenge to Drencal's orthodoxy. The incident deepened the rift between Vera and Drencal, his ambition now a tangible threat, while Elias's contribution earned him quiet nods from the crew, their mockery fading into curiosity, a shift that unnerved the traditionalists. A new complication arose when the Starlance intercepted a distress signal from a human freighter, the Dawn's Hope, stranded in a Vren-infested system. Vera, wary of diverting resources, considered ignoring the signal, but Elias recognized the ship's name. It belonged to a childhood friend, Lila, who'd survived the same pirate raid that took his family, her face a ghost from his past. He pleaded with Vera to investigate, his voice raw with a vulnerability she hadn't seen, his hazel eyes bright with hope and fear. Against Drencal's protests, Vera agreed, her scales flushing violet as she met Elias's gaze, a decision driven as much by her growing feelings as by strategy. The Starlance navigated the system's asteroid field, its shields flaring under Vren bioplasma barges, the crew fighting with disciplined fury to reach the freighter. They found Lila and a handful of survivors, their ship a wreck but their spirits unbroken, their gratitude a stark contrast to Kryon's stoicism. Lila, a wiry woman with scars matching Elias's, embraced him, her presence a reminder of the colony they'd lost, her stories of human defiance echoing Elias's own. The rescue bolstered Elias's standing among the crew, but Drencal used it to fuel his narrative, claiming Vera prioritized human lives over Kryon honor, his whispers gaining traction among the traditionalists, his amber eyes glinting with triumph. Sister Zorin, however, saw Lila's survival as another sign, her prayers growing louder, her followers chanting of the flame that burned in human hearts, a belief that both inspired and divided the crew. The Vren swarm struck without warning, their insectoid ships erupting from the asteroid field like locusts from a storm, their hulls organic and pulsating, shimmering with bioluminescent veins, their bioplasma weapons searing through the void and streaks of green fire that melted the Starlance shields. Vera's commands were a beacon in the chaos, her voice steady as she directed her warriors to outmaneuver the swarm's erratic formations, their ships darting like predators in a dance of death, the Starlance plasma cannons roaring as they carved through Vren drones, their wreckage scattering like ash across the void. Elias, working in the engineering bay, noticed a pattern in their attacks, a subtle rhythm in their bioplasma barrages that hinted at a central communication node, a weakness he'd seen in smaller Vren raids. He shared his observations with Kor, suggesting they target the node to disrupt the swarm's coordination, a tactic the Kryon hadn't considered, their strategies focused on brute force, their neural link systems blind to such subtleties. Vera approved the plan, her golden eyes meeting Elias's with a flicker of trust, a moment that made her scales flush violet, though Drencal scoffed, calling it a human's folly, his voice a challenge to her authority. The Starlance adjusted its targeting, striking the node with a precision strike, and the swarm's formations faltered, their psychic hum weakening, giving the Kryon a chance to push back. The victory was small but significant, and the crew's respect for Elias grew, though Drencal's resentment deepened, his crimson scales clicking as he plotted to undermine Vera at the next opportunity, his allies whispering of a conclave challenge. A second, more devastating attack came days later, a lucky shot piercing the Starlance defenses and striking its primary reactor, the heart of the ship's quantum core. The crew, fearless in battle, faltered as their technology failed, their neural interfaces stuttering as the ship's systems began to collapse. Kryon were warriors, not mechanics. Their reliance on perfect systems left them vulnerable when those systems broke. their pride a chain that bound them to inaction. The reactor's core pulsed erratically, its energy signature spiking toward catastrophic failure. A supernova in waiting that would consume the Starlance and all aboard. Elias, ignored in the frenzy, slipped into the reactor bay, his footsteps silent against the chaos of alarms and shouted orders. His heart pounding but his hands steady. The air was thick with ozone, the heat searing his skin, the radiation a silent poison that burned through his jumpsuit, leaving angry red marks across his arms. He had no training for this, no Kryon strength to withstand the environment, but he had a salvager's stubborn refusal to quit, a tenacity born of years surviving on the galaxy's fringes, where every day was a gamble against the void. His hands moved with desperate precision, splicing wires with a multi-tool, rerouting power through a backup system he'd studied in the ship's schematics during sleepless nights, his mind racing through calculations no Kryon would have bothered with, their technology too advanced for such crude improvisation. He recalled a wreck he'd salvaged years ago, a human freighter with a failing reactor he'd coaxed back to life with nothing but wire and hope, its memory a lifeline now, a reminder that broken things could be mended with enough will. This was no different, just bigger, deadlier, with Vera's life and Lila's and Core's hanging in the balance. He redirected the core's energy, stabilizing it just as the overload reached critical, the hum of the reactor settling into a steady rhythm, a heartbeat restored. When Vera found him, he was slumped against the console, his breath coming in shallow gasps, his jumpsuit singed, his hands trembling but the ship saved, the quantum core humming softly, a testament to his defiance of the odds. Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and awe as she demanded why he'd risked his life for a fight that wasn't his. Her golden eyes wide with something she couldn't name, a storm of emotions she'd been taught to bury. Elias, panting, managed a faint smile, saying he didn't feel like dying today and couldn't let her crew perish. Not when he could do something about it, not when she was among them. His words a confession he hadn't meant to voice. Vera ordered him to the med bay, her tone softer than she intended, her claws hovering near his arm as if to steady him, a gesture that spoke louder than her words. As he limped away, supported by a Kryon medic whose scales clicked in reluctant respect, Vera's heart stirred, a sensation she'd been trained to suppress, a crack in the armor of her warrior's discipline. Her scales flushed violet, brighter now, a sign she could no longer ignore, a fire that burned for a human who defied everything she'd been taught about strength. Drenkow, watching from the command deck, saw opportunity in the chaos, his ambition a blade he sharpened with every whisper. He spread rumors among the crew, claiming Vera's trust in the human weakened her, that her command faltered under the influence of a soft one. His words laced with venom as he rallied allies to challenge her at the next conclave, his crimson scales glinting with the promise of power. Yet the crew's respect for Elias grew, his actions in the reactor bay earning nods from warriors who'd once mocked him, their scales clicking in rhythms of approval. Core, the engineer, became an unlikely ally, sharing meals with Elias in the ship's mess hall, their conversations a mix of technical banter and cautious camaraderie, a bridge between species that grew stronger with each shared story. Core spoke of Kryon rituals, of the trials of flame where warriors proved their worth in duels on volcanic worlds, their blades glowing with plasma, their honor forged in fire. Elias shared stories of human resilience, of colonies rebuilt after disasters, of songs sung in defiance of despair, of his sister Mara who died in the pirate raid that took his family, her laughter a melody he carried in every salvage run, a light that kept him moving forward. Lila, now aboard the Starlance, joined their talks, her presence a reminder of the colony they'd lost, her stories of human defiance echoing Elias's own, her scars a mirror of his pain. Their bond, small but growing, was a crack in the galaxy's divisions, a testament to the connections that could form even in the shadow of war. Sister Zoran watched from the sidelines, her silver scales glowing as she saw the humans' influence spread, her prayers to the eternal pyre growing louder, her followers chanting of the flame that burned in human hearts, a belief that both inspired and divided the crew, their voices a quiet rebellion against the conclave's dogma. Vera, too, sought Elias out, her excuses thin, strategy meetings, system checks, inspections of his repairs. but their conversation stretched into the ship's quiet cycles, when the hum of the engines was the only sound, a rhythm that seemed to match the beating of her heart. They spoke of Kryon honor, rigid and unyielding, its codes etched into every scale of their society, a weight Vera had carried since Lyra's death, a burden that had shaped her into a commander feared and revered. Elias shared stories of Earth's skies, of oceans that roared with untamed power, of music that carried centuries of human longing, of his own life searching for meaning in the wreckage of the galaxy. Each salvage run a quest to honor Mara's memory. Vera, trained to see emotion as weakness, listened with growing fascination, her scales betraying her with faint violet flushes, a color she hadn't shown since her youth. She spoke of Kryon history, of wars fought on worlds of molten glass, of Lyra's laughter before the Vren took her, a wound she'd buried beneath duty, her confession a crack in the armor she'd worn for decades. Elias's questions, why Kryon suppressed their emotions, why vulnerability was shame, why they feared what made them alive, planted seeds of doubt in her mind, challenging the dogma she'd lived by, her scales flickering violet despite her efforts to remain stoic, a sign that her heart was no longer hers to control. One night, beneath the observation deck's crystal dome, a nebula swirled in hues of violet and gold, its light casting their faces in a celestial glow, the stars beyond a tapestry of infinite possibilities, each one a story waiting to be told. Vera stood without her armor, her sapphire scales gleaming like a starfield, her tail still for once, its ceremonial blade catching the light in a soft glow, a symbol of her duty now softened by her presence. Elias, in his patched jumpsuit, looked small beside her, yet his presence filled the space, a quiet gravity that drew her closer, a warmth that seemed to banish the cold of the void. She asked how humans bore their emotions, love, fear, joy, believing them a flaw that weakened their resolve, her voice low, almost hesitant, as if afraid of the answer, her golden eyes searching his for something she couldn't name. Elias's eyes traced the nebula as he spoke, his voice soft but sure, a warmth that seemed to fill the dome, a melody that resonated in her chest. He called emotions fuel. Love drove courage, fear sharpened focus, joy made life worth living. Kryon's strength, he said, was a cage without feeling, locking them away from what made existence vibrant, a prison that dulled the fire in their souls. He spoke of his mother's lullabies, sung on a colony where stars were the only light, of how those songs kept him going when the galaxy turned cold, of Mara's smile before the pirates came, a memory he carried like a shield, a light that guided him through the dark. Vera, her voice barely above a whisper, admitted she'd once felt joy, before Lyra's death, before Kryon training burned it away, her scales blazing violet as she spoke, a confession she hadn't allowed herself in years, a wound laid bare in the starlight. She spoke of Lyra's dreams, of a Kryon future where honor included love, a vision crushed by the Vren's claws, a loss that had hardened Vera into the commander she was. Elias's honesty, raw and unguarded, cut through centuries of Kryon dogma, sharp as any blade, a truth that pierced the walls she'd built around her heart. Vera stepped closer, her claws brushing his arm. An accident or so, she told herself, though her scales betrayed her, their violet glow a beacon in the dim light. When he met her gaze without flinching, his hazel eyes steady and warm, her worldview cracked, the rigid structure of her beliefs crumbling under the weight of his resilience, his fire. This human was not weak but resilient, his quiet courage a flame she'd never understood, a light that warmed her in ways she'd forgotten were possible. She whispered that he was not what she'd expected, her voice barely audible, her scales a riot of violet that betrayed her heart, a confession that hung in the air like a star about to be born. Elias, with a spark of humor, said he'd hate to be predictable, his smile softening the moment's weight, a warmth that made her tail still, her breath catch. The air between them hummed, warm and dangerous, a gravity neither could resist, a force that pulled them closer despite the chasm of their worlds. Vera turned away, her heart pounding, her scales a cascade of color she could no longer control, a fire that burned for a human who'd kindled something she'd thought lost forever. She was a commander, a warrior, but in that moment, She was a woman caught in a love she wasn't ready to name, a soul awakened by the unseen flame of a man who defied her expectations. The war with the Vren escalated, drawing the Starlance to a hive world, a jagged planet of obsidian spires and glowing hives, where the air pulsed with the Queen's psychic presence, a hum that pressed against the mind like a vice, a reminder of her dominion. The Kryon launched a desperate mission to destroy her, the Starlance diving into orbit amid a storm of bioplasma that seared the hull, its adaptive alloys struggling to keep pace, the ship's neural systems straining under the psychic assault. Vera led the ground assault, her warriors cutting through Vren drones in a chaos of claws, venom, and psychic screeches that clawed at the mind, a cacophony that threatened to unravel even the strongest will, their scales gleaming with sweat and blood. Elias, against her orders, joined them, armed with a salvaged plasma rifle and his wits, his presence a quiet defiance that made Vera's scales flush even in the heat of battle, a warmth she couldn't shake. He'd argued with her before the mission, insisting he could help, his voice firm but laced with that dry humor that made her heart stutter, a sensation she refused to name, though her golden eyes betrayed her, lingering on him longer than necessary. She'd relented, unable to deny the fire in his eyes, though she feared what it would cost, her claws tightening around her plasma blade as she led the charge, her tail lashing with determination. Drencal, sensing weakness, accompanied the assault, his crimson scales glinting as he positioned himself to undermine Vera, ready to claim glory and expose her reliance on the human, his ambition a shadow that followed her every move, his blades gleaming with malicious intent. Lila, refusing to stay behind, joined the team, her human stubbornness a mirror of Elias's, her presence a reminder of the stakes, her scars a testament to survival. Sister Zoran, defying the conclave, accompanied them, her silver scales glowing as she chanted prayers to the eternal pyre, her voice a beacon in the psychic storm, her belief in Elias a challenge to Kryon tradition. The Queen's chamber was a nightmare, its air thick with a psychic hum that pressed against the skull, its walls pulsing with organic light that seemed to ride with the Queen's will, a living fortress of chitin and venom that pulsed with malevolent life. Vera fought like a goddess, her plasma blades a blur, cutting through drones with lethal grace, her scales gleaming with sweat and blood, her movements a dance of death that inspired her warriors. Drenkel fought nearby, his blades equally deadly, but his eyes watched Vera, waiting for her to falter, his scales clicking with anticipation, his ambition a poison that tainted his every strike. Lila held her own, her plasma rifle a steady rhythm, her human resilience a defiance of the Vren's terror, her shouts a rallying cry for the team. Zoran's prayers wove through the chaos, her silver scales a light in the dark, her chants weakening the Queen's psychic hold, a miracle that steadied the warriors' minds. The Queen, a towering monstrosity of chitin and venom, was relentless, its pincers tearing through Vera's armor, drawing blood that glistened like sapphires, her strength waning as the psychic assault battered her mind, her blade slipping from her grasp as she staggered. As she fell, her golden eyes met Elias's, a silent plea she'd never voice, a moment that burned with unspoken love. Elias acted, diving between her and the Queen, his plasma rifle overheating in his hands as he fired to distract the beast, his shouts a defiance that echoed through the chamber, a human's courage against an alien god. Drencal hesitated, his ambition outweighing his duty, his blade still as he weighed the cost of aiding Vera, his crimson scales a stark contrast to the chaos. Lila fired at the Queen's eyes, her shots a distraction that bought Elias time, her voice a human snarl that matched his defiance. Zoran's chants grew louder, her prayers a shield against the psychic storm, her silver scales blazing as she called on the eternal pyre to guide them. Elias, with no time to think, triggered a Kryon grenade, its gravitic pulse collapsing the chamber's ceiling in a cascade of obsidian, the rubble crushing the Queen, its psychic scream fading into silence, a death knell that shook the hive, a victory won at a terrible cost. The explosion trapped Elias beneath the debris, his body swallowed by the chaos he'd unleashed, his sacrifice a spark that lit the darkness. Vera clawed through the wreckage, her strength fueled by a desperation she couldn't name, a fire that burned hotter than any Kryon ritual, a love she could no longer deny. Her claws tore at stone, her scales scratched and bleeding, her breath ragged as she searched for Elias, her golden eyes wet with unshed tears. A rarity for a Kryon, whose emotions were locked behind walls of discipline, a vulnerability she embraced in that moment. Drenkow stood back, his scales clicking in disdain, muttering that the human sacrifice was predictable, a waste, his voice of venom that sought to poison the moment, his ambition blinding him to the truth. Lila joined Vera, her human hands pulling at the rubble, her scars a mirror of her determination, her voice a quiet encouragement that kept Vera moving. Zoran prayed beside them, her silver scales glowing, her chants a plea for the eternal pyre to guide their hands, her faith a light in the dark. When Vera found Elias, bloodied but breathing, his face pale beneath the dust, his hazel eyes flickering with life, she cradled him, her sapphire scales pressed against his burned skin, her voice breaking as she called for a medic, demanding why he'd risked everything. Her words a tangle of anger, fear, and love. Elias, weak but smiling, said he couldn't let her die, not her. His voice a whisper that carried the weight of his heart, a truth that struck her like a blade, a confession that bound them forever. In that moment, Vera's world shattered, the walls of her Kryon training crumbling under the weight of her love for this human, this soft one, who'd given everything for her. Not for honor, not for glory, but for love, a force she'd been taught to deny but now felt with every beat of her heart. She pressed her forehead to his, a Kryon gesture of deepest respect, and whispered that he was her flame, her strength, her heart, her voice a vow that echoed through the chamber, a confession that transcended species and dogma. The words, forbidden to outsiders, spilled from her like a prayer, binding them in a way neither could have foreseen, a love that burned brighter than the stars. Her warriors, watching in stunned silence, lowered their weapons, their scales clicking in a rhythm that spoke of awe, their respect for the human sealed in that moment. Lila's eyes shone with tears, her hand resting on Elias's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of their shared past. Zoran's prayers softened, her silver scales glowing as she saw the pyre's prophecy fulfilled, her faith vindicated. Drenkow, his plans unraveling, turned away, his ambition thwarted by the human's act, his crimson scales dull in the dim light of the hive, his power broken by the fire he couldn't extinguish. Elias survived, his wounds a testament to his courage, his body scarred but his spirit unbroken, a fire that refused to be extinguished, a light that burned in defiance of the void. In the Starlint's medbay, Vera sat by his side, her presence a quiet promise, her golden eyes holding his in a silent conversation that needed no words, a bond forged in fire and tempered by love. Lila visited often, her stories of their colony a bridge to Elias's past, her resilience a reminder of humanity's strength, her presence a comfort that eased his pain. Kor stood guard, his emerald scales a silent vow to protect the human who'd earned his respect, his scars a map of battles fought and friendships won. Sister Zoran prayed nearby, her silver scales glowing as she chanted of the eternal pyre, her followers growing in number, their voices a chorus that challenged the conclave's dogma, a movement born of Elias's actions. The Kryon conclave, stunned by his sacrifice, convened to honor him, naming him a warrior of the Dominion, a title never granted to an outsider, a decision that sparked heated debate among the elders, some seeing it as a betrayal of tradition, others as a step toward a new era. Drenkow's challenge to Vera's command faltered, his allies swayed by Elias's sacrifice, their scales clicking in reluctant agreement as they acknowledged the human's worth. His defeat a quiet victory for Vera's vision. The Lorith, hearing of the victory, sent a message of gratitude. Their crystalline envoy, Silvara, noting that Elias's ingenuity had tipped the scales, their data proving crucial to the mission's success. Their trade networks buzzing with tales of the human who'd changed the Kryon. A diplomatic summit followed, posted on a neutral Lorith station, a crystalline sphere that floated in the void, its facets refracting starlight into a symphony of color, its halls humming with the voices of a dozen species. Vera represented the Kryon, her sapphire scales gleaming as she stood beside Elias, now healed but scarred, his presence a quiet defiance of the galaxy's scorn. Lila joined them, her human perspective a bridge to other species, her scars a testament to survival. Silvara mediated, her crystalline form shimmering as she called for unity against the Vren, her voice a melody that soothed tensions. Delegates from the Silicate warlords, the avian Zanari, and the gelatinous Korath watched Elias with curiosity, their preconceptions challenged by his actions, their voices a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Sister Zoran spoke of the eternal pyre, her silver scales glowing as she called Elias a sign of divine fire, her words stirring unease among the Kryon traditionalists but resonating with the Lorith, whose culture valued harmony. Elias spoke humbly, his dry humor disarming the delegates, his stories of human resilience, of colonies rebuilt, of songs sung in defiance of despair, echoing the HFY spirit, a quiet challenge to the galaxy's arrogance. Vera, her scales flushing violet, supported him, her voice steady but warm, a commander who'd found strength in love, a Kryon who'd embraced the fire of a human heart. The summit ended with a tentative alliance, the first step toward a galaxy where humanity was no longer a jest, a spark that promised new futures. Whispers of Elias Kane spread through the galaxy, carried by starship crews, alien envoys, and the Lorth's trade networks, a human who defied the stars and won a Kryon warrior's heart. His name a beacon for species who dismissed humanity as weak. Humanity, once mocked as fleeting and fragile, began to rise in the eyes of the cosmos, their resilience a challenge to empires that had underestimated them. Their colonies now sought as allies, their voices heard in holes where they'd once been ignored. The Kryon conclave debated the value of emotion, their elders questioning the dogma that had defined their culture, some proposing alliances with human colonies, others resisting but unable to deny the evidence of Elias's actions, their scales clicking in heated arguments that echoed through the Etherian. The Lorth sent envoys to human worlds, their crystalline ships a curiosity that sparked hope, their tales of Elias inspiring human outposts to dream beyond survival. The Zanari, their feathers glowing, invited human musicians to their courts, seeking songs that carried the fire Elias spoke of. Drenkal, his ambition crushed, was exiled to a remote outpost, his crimson scales a shadow of their former brilliance, his whispers a cautionary tale against pride, his defeat a testament to the power of unity. Sister Zoran's followers grew, their chants of the eternal pyre a movement that reshaped Kryon culture, their silver scales a symbol of change, a flame that burned for a new era. On the Kryon colony world, under a sky of twin suns, Elias and Vera walked through fields of crystalline grass, each blade singing softly in the breeze, their facets catching the light in a dance of color that seemed to celebrate their union. The air was thick with the scent of alien flora, their fractal petals glowing faintly in the dusk, a living tapestry woven by Kryon artisans who'd shaped their world with care. In the distance, the spires of a Kryon city rose, their obsidian and crystal forms blending with the landscape, each rune etched into their surfaces a story of honor, now enriched by tales of love. Vera's hand found his, her talons gentle against his skin, a gesture that no longer drew stares from the Kryon, who'd come to see Elias as a warrior in his own right, their scales clicking in respect as they passed. Lila walked with them, her presence a bridge to Elias's past, her laughter a reminder of the colony they'd lost, now honored in their new home. Vera's scales gleamed, catching the twin suns in a cascade of sapphire and violet, her golden eyes reflecting a love she'd once feared, a strength she'd found in vulnerability. Elias teased her, his voice light but warm, asking if she'd ever call him Soft One again. His grin a spark that made her laugh, a sound as rare and bright as the crystalline grass, a melody that warmed the air. Vera's smile was radiant, her scales shimmering as she called him her unseen flame, and herself his, her voice a vow that carried the weight of her heart, a promise that transcended species, a fire that would burn forever. Their love, a spark in the darkness, had ignited a blaze that reshaped the galaxy, a bond that proved strength was not in scales or steel, but in the heart that dared to feel, to fight, to love. Humanity's fire, underestimated and overlooked, now burned bright, a beacon for a cosmos learning to see its power, not in conquest, but in resilience, in hope, in the unseen flames that lit the stars. Elias and Vera stood together, their hands entwined, their gazes fixed on the horizon, where a future waited, a future of alliances, of challenges, of a galaxy where love was as mighty as any weapon, where the human spirit was a force that could warm the void itself. The tale of Elias and Vera echoes through the ages, a testament to the power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in a universe of cold stars and colder hearts, a single spark can change everything. Humanity, flawed and radiant, carries a flame that no darkness can extinguish, a light that burns brightest in love, a beacon for a galaxy awakening to the power of the unseen, a promise that the smallest fire can light the stars forever.